and welcome back to Super Sons. I'm Dan. I use he, him pronouns.
And I'm Jake.
And today on our show, we have Jordan Clark, writer of Elk Mountain, Bitch Planet Triple Feature, The Black Experience, and his newest story coming out in the Crimes of Passion anthology. It's a Batwoman story. I don't remember the name. I think I forgot it.
It's called Out of the Past.
All right. Well, now we know. Jordan, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Great. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no problem.
Very excited to have you. These anthologies have been probably Jake, I would say they're the highlights of our seasons, like the best stuff that's coming out. And
I wrote a whole article about that.
Yeah. And you are writing one of my favorite characters and one of my favorite relationships. So very excited to talk about that. So as all hard-hitting journalists do, we ask the questions that everyone else is afraid to ask. So let's get this started. What's your favorite sandwich?
I think I would say the Popeye's chicken sandwich.
Yeah?
At this point, I think the only thing about I do like spicy food, and the spicy sandwich is good, but I think basically everything for me could just be like a little bit spicier. So if there's just like a little bit more cayenne or like a little bit more of I don't know if you need to go like ghost pepper hot or anything like that, but just like something a little hotter on the sandwich, it would be the perfect sandwich. My
follow-up to that was you went for the spicy one then.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, I've tried both, and I definitely
How many fist fights have you won for one?
Well, see, that's the thing. I made the mistake initially of trying to get one on DoorDash when it first came out, not knowing that people were going crazy over it. So it took an hour and a half for the sandwich to come, and I was like,
Jesus,
I guess this is worth it. But then after that, I didn't go again until basically near the end when they got rid of it the first time. And then I waited a couple weeks after they brought it back just because I am not fighting somebody over a sandwich.
Yeah. I got one the second time they came out because I didn't want to venture out for the first one. Yeah. I waited 45 minutes in the drive-thru and I was like, wow, this better be delicious. And it was actually, I gotta say, probably my favorite chicken sandwich that I've got from from a chain restaurant. I was like, yeah, this is delicious.
See, but now you can just go in and get one, whenever. It's not, nobody cares anymore. So
yeah, which is wild.
I mean, it was worth the hype.
It's good. Popeyes is my favorite fast food chicken place. So it took me a while to remember they never had a sandwich before this, but I guess not. I guess they just had po' boys and stuff like that weren't a real chicken sandwich.
Have you ever had Bojangles?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably my top, just because they have a bangin' breakfast.
Yeah.
But I've never had their not breakfast chicken.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's all, for me, KFC is the bottom.
Yeah.
So everything else, scaling up is good. It's hard. Fried chicken and pizza are two things that I feel it's pretty hard to mess those up. So.
Yeah. Jake is a pizza connoisseur too.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Pizza is love. Pizza is life. All right. So how about we get to our next question? What is your DC origin story? How did you first get into the universe, and who's your character?
So where I was growing up, I grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland. So for people who don't know where that is, that's just a little bit outside of DC. And there is no comic shops around where I was. So my comic, getting into superheroes and comics and stuff like that was basically all the animated 90s shows. So X-Men and Batman and Superman and all that. And at the time, like Marvel had all the shows. Like there was a Spider-Man show, there was an X-Men show, there was a Fantastic Four show, Silver Surfer, Hulk, Iron Man. Like basically everybody had a show. So I grew up pretty much a Marvel kid because like from the animated shows and then all the video games, like the X-Men video games. And the Spider-Man video games, and then when the movies started coming out, the Spider-Man movies and the X-Men movies, like that was it for me. And the only comic shop around where I was growing up was like a collectible store that they didn't want kids going into. So like all my comics were like from thrift stores and flea markets and stuff like that. And then occasionally my parents would get me like the big X-Men like black and white like paperbacks. So it wasn't until I got into college that I really started getting into comics because I had a professor who was super cool who like got me into Doctor Who and like all this other stuff. But then he started like pushing DC comics on me. And then Dark Knight came out and I skipped one of my classes that day to go see Dark Knight. And it was amazing. And then after that, I was like, I need to read all these comics. So I got Long Halloween, and then I got Watchmen, and then I got Batman Year One, and like all this other stuff. And because of the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited stuff, I was a huge Flash fan. So I read like all the Flash, everything, the Jeff Johns, the Mark Waid, the Grant Morrison, and like just every time I got paid, I would just go to my local shop and get like 2 or 3 trades and just like pour through them. So that was kind of my in. And then around the time I started getting into single issues, that's when New 52 happened. And so on the one hand, it's great because it's like this reboot of all the stuff. On the other hand, it's like 52 comics. I was like, well, I can't buy 52 books, but like I'll kind of mess around. And, you know, from there I got into Scott Snyder's Batman and his Swamp Thing and Jeff Lemire's Animal Man, and just like so much great stuff from that. So from there I was just kind of like, I was hooked. And I'm not like a hardcore loyalist like some people. So like Marvel and DC are both great. You know, I love them equally. But DC for me has a lot of the like horror stuff and the magic stuff that I think they do well. Definitely through like Vertigo. Like Vertigo was like a whole different level of stuff with like Shade the Changing Man and Grant Morrison's Animal Man and Alan Moore Swamp Thing and all that. So yeah, I would say that's kind of what got me hooked. And my favorite character is everybody's favorite character, which is Booster Gold, the greatest superhero.
Hell yeah.
So I love Booster Gold. I loved him since Justice League Unlimited, where, you know, his episode where he's kind of handling business behind the scenes because he's on crowd control duty. But like Justice League International is one of my favorite comics of all time. And that whole run is amazing. And like his friendship with Blue Beetle, and then a lot of his solo stuff, like the Jeff Johns solo stuff after New 52 is amazing. And his whole arc in 52 is amazing. If you haven't read it, there's a whole bunch of like Booster Gold stuff in there, but there's a part where, spoiler for 52, I guess, where Booster Gold dies. But then his casket is covered in like promotional stickers from all of his sponsors throughout the years. It's amazing. So Booster Gold is my number one.
He's great.
He's like you read our bios and was like, oh yeah, these are their favorite things. You talked about Animal Man, Swamp Thing, and Booster Gold.
Yeah, I'm currently going through a deep dive on Booster. Mm-hmm. And I found one of my new favorite characters in the original run, Trixie. Trixie is great.
Yes.
I just want to go home. One of the greatest panels in all of comics.
Well, in that whole run, I mean, like Booster Gold's kind of like he started off not like serious, but like I think Dan Jurgens definitely had an idea for him where he would be a little bit more lighthearted, but he did have some pretty serious like arcs during his initial run.
Yeah, it seemed like the Time Cop kind of stuff was like in his mind already to some level.
But then, I mean, Justice League International took it to a whole different level, and then like 52 and the Jeff Johns stuff took it to a whole different level. So he's like,
and then it went right back to Jurgens and then Giffen.
Yep.
And then the Jim Lee design.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing too. When you go back and you look at the original Booster Gold design with the cape and like all that other stuff, like, and then he had some weird.
He Ash Ketchum's that.
Yeah,
it's like, all right, but out of the battle's getting going, capes off.
What?
and the symbol was a pentagram.
Right, and then in the 90s he had this terrible like
all the armor
redesign. Yeah, like I mean he's gone through it with the costume.
He went through two redesigns within 3 issues.
Yeah. But
then Dan Jurgens came back and redesigned him again and made one of the best costumes, and then it went right back to the original.
Yeah, I mean his original costume, Sans cape, is pretty great. So I don't know. It's one of those things like I love Booster Gold's costume and I love Taskmaster's costume, and I don't really know either of those if you could really improve upon them in any way. I think they're just kind of perfect the way they are.
Yeah. I think most media has proven you cannot improve upon Taskmaster's look. It just keeps getting worse.
Yeah, he's got a skull for a face. Like that's what else do you need? Just get whether it's like a mask or like a helmet or like his actual face or however you want to do it. It's just CGI the skull like you CGI Spider-Man's mask or Deadpool's mask.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I'm glad you guys went on that Booster Gold talk because I thought it would be nice to leave Mira, my cat, in here. Like I was like, oh, she's being really good in her bed. And since you guys started talking, she has climbed on the table 3 times and is now staring at me from across the room because I made her get off.
Well, because she's got to hear about Booster. Like, I think her ears perked up and she was like, what's this conversation?
Well, I mean, that Gold Star has 2 cats in the lobby, so it's fine. It's fine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, so now to my character. So when you did you get to choose Batwoman for your story for the Valentine's Day special?
So I was given some options. There was a list of characters that the editors of the book were interested in. You know, like they definitely had stuff already that was walled off because other people were doing them. So they're like, here are the characters that you can't do, but here are some of the characters that we are interested in. And then if you just want to like pitch us something else on top of that, like feel free to kind of, you know, use your imagination, see what you can come up with. But for me, I mean, once they said Batwoman, like on top of everything, you know, she's got the TV show now on CW and, you know, her profile is continuing to rise, but like I'm a huge fan of the Greg Rucka Batwoman run and then the J.H. Williams Hayden Blackman run. And so like I was just like, if I could do Batwoman, like I wasn't quite sure if I was going to get it because I was like, Batwoman's kind of a big deal. So like if I could get this and like kind of work in some stuff, like that would be amazing. And so I pitched them a story. My story has Maggie Sawyer in it. And that was another thing. They didn't really specify because, you know, there's Kate Kane and Maggie Sawyer, but there's also Kate Kane and Renee Montoya, The Question. So she's got a few different love interests going on. But for me, Maggie was the one that I really felt like there was a real story there and something to explore.
I'm glad you said I'm a Maggie side too.
Yep.
But so you already answered my question. I was going to ask if you had any like personal connection to them. But
oh yeah,
you read those runs, which are some of my favorite comics.
Yeah, and I read it in a weird way because I read again, like when I was getting into everything, like so many comics were coming out when New 52 was coming out, so I kind of had to choose. And Batwoman was one that I wasn't really up on initially, but then I started hearing more and more about it, so I checked it out. And then around that same time, I was going back to read 52. So I read 52, and that's kind of Kate's origin and like where she comes in. And then halfway through the J.H. Williams run, I went back and I read the Greg Rucka detective run, the Elegy. So I was kind of getting like different bits and pieces of everything as I was going along. But it's one of the best modern comic runs, in my opinion. Like if you count everything together as one, like Greg Rucka through James Williams run as like one thing, like it's impressive, not only just from like the character work perspective, how they kind of took this character who could have been like, anytime there's not just like a woman character of a main male character, but like any kind of like spinoff, like extra spider people, extra bat people, like it could kind of be like, well, what else do you have to offer that's just like not just like watered down Batman? And they really took her and made her into not only something that could stand on its own, like Batwoman is like, her fan base and the people that love her and follow her are like some of the most devoted fans in comics, but she's so interesting, so fascinating. Her relationship with Maggie is so fascinating. And it's one of the things that I just keep coming back to every time. I think about romance in comics, and I think about how to develop that over a long period of time. Like it's really amazing. So if you haven't read any of that, I would strongly suggest going to read, starting with Batwoman Elegy and then moving into the J.H. Williams stuff, because it's amazing.
Yeah, J.H. Williams has some of the coolest art like in the game. Like,
yes,
his art when you see it, especially because the paneling is so unique. Especially like in Elegy, like that first splash page with the symbol and her jumping over. Oh man.
Mm-hmm. And he doesn't do it in a way that's like him just showing off for no reason. Like every time he does that, there's story and like real just meaning behind it. You know what I mean? Like it's one thing to just kind of like, hey, here's a crazy panel, like here's a crazy layout, but the way that he does it and it flows just through everything is unbelievable.
All right. So is there any positive trend you're seeing in comics, and what more do you want to see from that?
I think comics is in a good place right now in terms of the creative side and a lot of the things that I'm seeing just in terms of the work that's coming out. It's hard just because comics is still very much so kind of a niche thing. Like
like the superhero genre has blown up, but the books themselves have stayed.
Yeah. And like, even, I mean, if you look at like sales wise, like Raina Telgemeier's the top selling comics creator in all of comics. And she's doing, Scholastic books and selling to a YA market. And you're seeing DC now and Marvel kind of moving into that, doing more, YA graphic novels and things like that, which I think is great. Just trying to get a younger audience pulled into comics and pulled into these characters and, given something that's relatable to them and something that feels like their own instead of, them having to go through not even just a lot of gatekeeping, but like a lot of just, continuity. Like I think that's probably the hardest thing for a lot of people. When you think of like X-Men, like how many X-Men are from the past or clones or back from the dead or, like all kinds of stuff.
Everyone.
Which is like, I don't know what's happening anymore. So, having that space where it's kind of open now to more people, whether it's young people or older people who are trying to get into comics for the first time or trying to get back into comics after a long time. I think that's great. And I like to see more of that. And, also just seeing kind of like the comics community as a whole, like on Twitter and other social media spaces, just a lot of this appreciation and crossover between some of the more mainstream people and some of the more independent people, and kind of just like, people just showing love and appreciation for comics, no matter if it's superhero comics or if it's historical comics or whether it's, slice of life comics. Like there's so much great stuff out there, and people kind of, championing that and, spreading the word about that, I think is great. So I like to continue to see just kind of that comics community build and kind of bring in more people.
So, do you think living in a city has influenced the way you write at all? And do you see any specific Maryland flair in any of your writing?
Yeah, I think it's interesting for me just because I've lived in Baltimore now for like 11 years, and like I would like to live in a city as long as possible. Like I'd have no desire to go back to the suburbs, but I feel like there's definitely things about being in a city that can kind of work their way into your writing. Where I grew up in Silver Spring, it was definitely a diverse area. Like I went to school with people from all religious backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds and all different orientations. And like, it wasn't like a thing where it was like, whoa, you're different. It was like, yeah, we're all in middle school. Our hormones are crazy. None of us knows what's going on. So like we were all, mostly accepting of each other. And, I kind of had a great, just experience of meeting all kinds of different people from all walks of life. But, in a city, it's just kind of, it's everywhere, it's every place that you go. And, for me, living in Baltimore, I think there's, just a lot of great history here. There's a lot of great, whether it's, just art in general, whether it's kind of, social activism that's happening around the city, whether it's, just kind of the cultural things that we have here. It does kind of work its way into my writing, and specifically just like people and characters. Like Baltimore, if you haven't been to Baltimore, it's not The Wire. Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people just assume it's The Wire. It's not The Wire. I mean, like every city, if you're someplace that you shouldn't be at 2:00 in the morning, something bad might happen to you. Like it's like every other city in that way. But there's definitely characters in Baltimore, and there's definitely just, you walk down the street and you just see stuff sometimes that you're like, that's Baltimore. Like it's more.
Yeah, Baltimore is like that.
Yeah,
I used to go to school up in Towson, so.
Okay, yeah. And
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. No, it's definitely more John Waters than it is The Wire. Like you just kind of see
exactly
crazy stuff sometimes. And it's like, but I see that stuff and I kind of like either make a mental note, or if I have a notebook on me, just make like a literal note to like see if I can work some of that stuff into, the stories that I tell.
I love the John Waters, just because it's Baltimore and now I'm in Philly. So they're two cities that embrace their weirdness. They're just kind of like, that's who we fucking are.
Yeah.
And
it's a weird place. Like I think there's it's weird in a lot of different ways, but I think
Baltimore gets even weirder when you think about how half of a big portion of the city is vacant.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, just like, if you think of, other cities, even like New York, if you go to New York and you're in Manhattan, like it's Manhattan for like large blocks. Like you can walk 10, 15 blocks and everything feels the same. Baltimore, you might be walking and it's like, man, this neighborhood is great. Look at all these nice houses and all this stuff. And then you turn the corner and you walk 2 more blocks and you're like, ooh, I don't know if I should be here. And then you walk 2 more blocks after that and it's something completely different. So it's all kind of, merging and flowing into each other. But yeah, I mean, there's just, you see some of the murals and the artwork around the city. You see some people dressed very curiously or maybe doing some curious things as you're just kind of going about your day. And, you might just run into somebody and have a very interesting conversation. But I think anybody, wherever they live, they're kind of just soaking up small things. And I'm definitely soaking up a lot of the stuff that I see here in Baltimore.
Well, our next question is, any DC character you would love to write?
Well, Booster Gold obviously is my
Hold
number
on, hold
one.
on. I gotta ask, would you try to figure out what happens with Ranny?
Possibly. I think the thing that's so interesting about Booster Gold is that he's had, it's not even different iterations, but like he's one of these heroes that I think has had, this kind of tangible timeline, right? Because I mean, he's, a time traveling hero. Yeah, so you can track him in a way that you can't necessarily track some other heroes, but there's also just a lot of stuff that like, because his series usually get canceled, unfortunately, it just never gets resolved. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of stuff that's just out there kind of waiting for people to pick up and get back into. So
luckily Dan Jurgens has been able to get back on the book multiple times to just go with the character.
And he always, I mean, no matter what he's writing, guaranteed Booster Gold is going to show up. I think Booster Gold showed up in his Action Comics run. I don't know if Booster Gold showed up in Batman Beyond, but I mean, most Dan Jurgens things that he's working on, Booster Gold will eventually show up in some way, shape, or form, which is great because it's just another way to keep the character alive. So, yeah, I mean, Booster, obviously, if I ever got the opportunity, like, I would love that. I like to write Cyborg. I think he's a real interesting character that, has because he's been in Teen Titans and then, came along to do the Justice League stuff in New 52. Like, he's usually been in a group situation, and then a few instances, he's had his own solo book, but I think just kind of digging a little bit further than is he a man or a machine, and kind of getting deeper into who he is as a person. There's a lot of interesting stuff there. I don't know if it will ever happen just because there's a lot of legal stuff, but like Static Shock and the whole Milestone universe is very interesting, and there's a lot of really cool stuff to explore there. So I'd love to do any Milestone related books and characters. I guess, I mean, there's a lot of characters that I love that, like, I don't know if would merit a series, like Elongated Man and Detective Chimp, and just a lot of weird. There's like, DC is weird, like Marvel is strange, but DC is just real. There's a lot of weird stuff buried in DC Comics.
DC just has the weird. Marvel tries to push the weird a little bit, but it doesn't always land. But then, you have like Ambush Bug.
DC tries to put it back in the basement. It's like, all right, please don't let them out again.
Well, you got Ambush Bug, you've got Buana Beast, you've got
Fire.
you've got the Ten-Eyed Man and
Battery Eater Lad.
Yeah.
The one
Plant Mineral Vegetable Man.
Yeah. He was in Doom Patrol. That was wild.
Yeah.
Resurrection Man is my personal one that I'd love to see more of. Like, how cool is that? This character dies and then he gets a brand new superpower.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if any of the Vertigo stuff is canon in the sense of, it follows through, in the DC world, but I mean, like Kid Eternity and Shade the Changing Man, and so many of the.
Did you get to read Shade the Changing Girl?
I love Shade the Changing Girl.
Oh, those runs were so I would love to see the Young Animal stuff more in main continuity, but after that Milk War book, I don't know where they're at.
Yeah,
Gerard Way's on tour.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean they did a lot of great, just strange offbeat stuff there too. So there's room for it. I mean, I think there's always an audience for it. So it just depends on how they want to put that out.
Yeah. So kind of piggybacking off of that, and it seems like you're into a little bit of the more offbeat things like that. What has been some of the biggest influences on you as a writer in general?
Yeah, I mean, as I've continued to grow as a writer, I think I've started to pull in more and more things, which definitely helps just because, trying to base everything strictly off of comics. Like, I think every creator kind of initially is pulling directly from, one or two sources, and they kind of sound like those people, or their work looks like those people, just because they're kind of going through those learning and infancy phases. And then as you kind of continue to grow, like, other weird influences from your life kind of work their way in. So for me, like, the first script I ever saw was a Neil Gaiman script in the back of a Sandman trade. And I was just like, well, that's how you write comics. So I tried to write like Neil Gaiman, and that was a disaster because I'm not Neil Gaiman. But I definitely learned from that. And I mean, he's definitely somebody who, whether it's Sandman or whether it's just some of his other, works, his other books, things like, American Gods and things like his Miracle Man run. Like he's not only just a wealth of imagination, but, he's somebody who thinks about comics and craft and writing in a serious way, but also in a way that kind of shows that you don't have to stick to one mode. You can be playful with it and try out a lot of different things. And, people like Grant Morrison. Grant Morrison's Animal Man run is one of my favorite runs in all of comics. And just one of the weirdest, most out there kind of things, but like really kind of, broke things down and showed me that you can do so many different things, within the world of comics. But then even starting to spread out from that, like Kurt Vonnegut is my favorite writer, period. Yeah, James Baldwin's one of my favorite writers. I'm getting more and more into Stephen King as I kind of go along, and, reading stuff like The Dark Tower and The Stand, which are just these kind of, pun intended, these towering kind of works that really, do a great amount of world building and a great amount of just character work over a long period of time. And that's kind of what you're getting into in comics, is this serialized long form storytelling. So trying to pull from that. I'm a big music fan. So there's a lot of just songwriters and rappers that I like, whether it's, somebody like Bob Dylan, who's got this very, lyrical storytelling style, or whether it's somebody like Black Thought from The Roots, or Kendrick Lamar, or whether it's, just a lot of different jazz musicians. Like, one of my favorite musicians of all time is Sonny Rollins, who was a saxophonist, who kind of, long story short, at the height of his career, stopped playing publicly because he thought that he had gotten to where he got too fast and people were giving him too many accolades before he actually earned them. So he took a whole year off and just practiced on a bridge, and then came back better than he ever was. And like, I think about that story a lot, because just the courage that it would take, and like the self-determination and self-belief that it would take to work as hard as he did to get to the top, and then, follow that instinct and that gut that says, this isn't right. Like, I can be better than I am, and to put in that work to actually improve, where a lot of people would get there and be like, I made it, I did it. But having that just kind of self-awareness to say, there's always more to learn, and there's always more to kind of, grow. So I try to keep that attitude as I go along, and I'm always looking for different things to pull in, whether it's movies or television or, novels or poetry or music or just any other thing that I can kind of pull from to kind of add to what I do.
Wow. That story's, I'm going to have to get his name again after this so I can look into a little bit, because that takes like a lot of courage to be like on top and be like, I have to earn this.
Yeah, no, Sonny Rollins is incredible. And he played with everybody. I mean, he played with Coltrane, he played with Miles Davis, he played with Thelonious Monk and a lot of the top guys. So, I mean, he was in that range of guy, and during that time, he still said, I need to earn being here in my mind. So like, yeah, I mean, it's hard to kind of, have that level of like self-awareness, but also, again, just self-belief. Like
like I creative art, keep pushing.
Yeah. Creative arts can be hard because, I mean, you're always trying to figure out like, where you stand, not even just against other people, but like in your own mind, like, am I living up to the expectations that I have of myself and what I think my work should be? And sometimes you can be very hard on yourself, and like, that's not good, but sometimes you can kind of get too comfortable. And that's not good either. You always want to kind of be somewhere in between where you're, feeling good about the work you're doing, but also looking to push yourself to go further and do more.
Wow. I feel like I needed to hear that just in general right now.
Oh, absolutely. Whew. Well, we kind of touched on this next question a little bit with the character you'd love to write, but is there any obscure character or like less utilized character that you would like to see more of from DC?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of characters that I think are interesting. Like, again, like, I don't know if any of them are able to kind of sustain an ongoing series. I think that's what's great about it.
It can just be like a random appearance in the background. I don't care how involved they are.
Well, I think that's what's great about these anthologies, though, is that, even in this Crimes of Passion anthology, like, there's a Slam Bradley story, and Slam Bradley's not, one of the top premier characters in DC, but like, just to see him again is awesome. There's a Wildcat story. Which is awesome.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Oh, I love Wildcat.
Wildcat is amazing, and again, he's not a character that you could say, yeah, let's give like a 30-issue run to Wildcat.
Yeah, he could hold like a mini series.
Yeah,
but I feel like it would probably stop at like 24 issues if you got an ongoing.
Right. But having spaces like these are great for those kind of characters. So yeah, I mean, I like when it gets weird. I like when it gets just kind of out there. Like, one of my favorite things about the Justice League International run is that there's just some weird ass characters from all over the DC universe that kind of just make all kinds of cameos throughout the series. And again, even something like, I'm curious to see how Bendis pulls it off, just because the Legion of Superheroes is also very strange and very weird. And like
it's very easy to mess it up.
It's easy to mess it up, but it's also endless. Like, there's a million of them. Like, there's so many of them that like you could just keep adding characters every issue and you probably would never run out. So yeah, I mean, like, if you want to give us some Ambush Bug, if you want to give us some Buona Beast, if you want to give us some even like in the Books of Magic original graphic novel by Neil Gaiman, like there is just a lot of weird, like Dr. 13 and Mr. E and Dr. Occult, some of those more like magic horror kind of characters. Phantom Stranger is always cool. Who else is there? Yeah, I mean,
that whole Vertigo gang is just so interesting.
Oh yeah, and there's stuff that I don't know if like a character like a Human Target is like, not necessarily like a superhero, and then even like Hitman is like, that's Garth Ennis all the way.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I mean, there's stuff that like if the original creators came back to work on them, like I'd love to see more stuff from them. But I mean, yeah, DC is just kind of a boundless, just for the weird, I mean, even just going back, if you read any of the Silver Age stuff, and I love Fraction and Lieber's Jimmy Olsen book right now, just because it's doing that, but it's also kind of giving a nod to just how crazy all that was, because there was issues where Jimmy Olsen just tried to cut Superman's hair, or like Superman was in a pancake eating contest, or like all kinds of just weird stuff that they were doing, and just weird characters from out of nowhere that never showed up again. There was kind of
the Comics Code Authority was made things a little.
I think maybe one of my favorite covers of all time is Superman opening the present that Jimmy got him and just burning it.
Yeah.
Like he raised it. I think about that a lot. Like Old Testament Superman.
Yeah.
Dick Superman is great. Like
He's awesome.
The covers.
Sometimes
for
Dan
those
likes
books.
to emulate him and just like burn stuff that people give him.
You got to keep them on their toes. You can't get them too comfortable.
Yeah.
I
Be
can't
like
be like all-star Superman. I gotta give him a little bit of the old guy.
Yeah.
Okay, so this one's a little bit heavier than the rest of them. What are some topics, themes, or issues you think should be addressed a little bit more in comics?
So, I mean, I think the great thing about comics, again, especially now, because there's so many different people making comics and that have access to not only making work, but sharing work, whether it's social media or just on the internet, or making zines or things like that, is, there's so many comics that are not only just talking about, important issues, social issues, political issues, mental health issues, things like that. But there are creators from all kinds of backgrounds who are able to speak to their own life experience, and you're able to read their stories and kind of get, that firsthand perspective from them. So, stuff like the Nib, I think, does a great job of just kind of giving an open platform to a lot of people to express, what they're going through. I mean, just reading comics from, immigrants, reading comics from, survivors of sexual assault and sexual abuse, and, people who have just kind of lived through some pretty rough stuff, but came out the other side and, now have this platform through comics to tell these stories and not just, tell their story, but, there's a validation in being able to see yourself and things that you recognize in the media that you consume. So, people who have been through similar situations, having the opportunity to read stories that reflect, the life that they have lived and the experiences they have gone through, I think is very important. So, that's one of the things why I'm always a big advocate for not only just diversity, within different media spaces, but diversity of, just people from all walks of life, all, orientations and religious backgrounds and experiences, to get to tell stories, whether it's, through superhero comics, which is, this big platform where, if you tell a Superman story or you tell a Batman story or a Spider-Man story, like even just small stuff like an All-Star Superman and that one page where, the girl's about to jump off, the top of the building and Superman comes. He's just like, your therapist really did get stuck in traffic, and now I'm going to give you a hug. That's something that I think even just a small thing like that goes a long way for people who might be dealing with, similar feelings and emotions. So it's hard, I did a comic, Elk Mountain, which was about an immigrant superhero and kind of dealing with, a lot of the things that are going on in our country today. And, you don't want to get too preachy with it. You don't want to kind of be...
You want to be subtle.
Right. Because if you're on the soapbox, people are they'll get the message, but, they might kind of tune out earlier than you want them to. Whereas if you tell a story where, these things and these issues are at the heart of it and they're a big part of it, but they're not the whole thing. There's still, plot developing. There's still characters to grow attached to. There's still relationships that are evolving. You can always, throw that in and have those, serious and important topics, worked into the story. And even if it is about that, still not just kind of giving it that heavy-handed treatment, trying to be, like you said, more subtle, but also putting it out there in a way that, really gives people the opportunity to connect with it on their own instead of just saying, this is how it is. Like some things, that's how it is. Like global warming is how it is. Like there's no other side to that. Like that's a fact. But, presenting a life experience that some people may have experience and some other people may not have experience, but not trying to go so far with it that you're just kind of like pushing it on people again and again.
Because they'll get standoffish.
Yeah, I mean,
they'll push back.
Yeah, I mean, as we've seen again, just in the world that we live in today, like people don't really like to be forced into opinions. Like people are more likely to dig deeper into their own opinions and like kind of dig their feet in the ground than just kind of say, oh, you know what, you're right and I'm wrong, and now I'm going to change my mind. So being able to just tell the story, like I think there's a definitive need for that across just not only just comics but all media. But comics is such a versatile medium where you can't have something like Mouse, or you can't have something like Persepolis, or you can't have something like Fun Home. And then you can have, all this crazy superhero stuff. And then you can have all this weird, like Lovecraftian horror stuff and all these other things that aren't necessarily dealing with that, but they all kind of exist in the same place.
Well, on a less heavy note, I'm going to say.
Yeah.
What is your guilty pleasure?
Man, I love bad movies, like real bad.
All right, what do you got? What is your go-to bad movie?
So, I mean, there's stuff like Troll 2, which I think is the greatest bad movie of all time, and obviously The Room, stuff like Birdemic. But then there's other stuff that's like, because it has to be bad, but made with good intentions. Like the people making the movie have to think that they made a real good movie, right? Yeah. Because those are the best ones. Not like some of the latest sci-fi movies where it's just like, we're making a bad movie on purpose. They can be fun sometimes, but like Leprechaun in Space is a bad movie, and it's so fun to watch. And like they're mostly horror movies. Like there's a lot of really bad horror movies that, whether it's the makeup, whether it's the CGI effects, whether it's the acting or the story, like there's stuff like I just watched Dracula 3000, and that was just a bad movie. Like that wasn't really, I mean, there were some enjoyable parts, but that was overall just not good. But I'm a huge fan of like Mystery Science Theater 3000, and the Flophouse and stuff like that, where they just kind of go into these terrible films and just watch them and enjoy them for what they are. So yeah, I mean, I love good movies. I appreciate good cinema, but I also really love just a real terrible movie.
It would have been, next time I get someone like whoever asks me this question, I'm going to give them, I love bad movies, but they're like, oh, like what? And I'll be like, oh, Citizen Kane, The Godfather, and just see how many people I can piss off.
There's certain movies that I feel like when I watched Citizen Kane for the first time, I fell asleep just because I was just like,
oh, it's boring.
I was tired. It's long, and it's it's hard because it's the first movie like that, and every movie after that emulated that, and it's like going back and reading Watchmen after reading all the comics that copied it, and going back and reading Alan Moore's Swamp Thing or Chris Claremont's X-Men, or all these things that you're just like, well, what's the big deal? But it's like, well, if you were alive, or reading comics at the time when that came out, like this is a huge paradigm shift. Like nothing was like this.
Yeah, like the Vader
changed
reveal.
Everything.
Yeah. But now you're just like, okay, like it's just another version of all these other things that came out. So for me, when I watched Citizen Kane for the first time, I was like, okay. And then I went back and I finished the movie and I was like, okay, it's a good movie. Like I enjoy it. But it's kind of hard the first time because you're just like, this is the greatest movie of all time.
Yeah, it's also kind of wild to me that he directed, produced, wrote, starred. He did it all.
Yeah.
Which is, I think the movie itself is more of a feat than the movie itself, if that makes sense.
Sure. And like Orson Welles was crazy. You know what I mean? Like in a good way. Like he was a very smart, clever man, but like he was just like well, he was a control freak. So I mean, he was like, I'm just going to do all of this on my own. And he was good enough at all of those things, at writing and directing and producing and acting, that like he could pull it all off. But like I can't imagine doing everything like that and keeping my sanity.
Yeah, like when would you sleep?
I don't know. I don't know if he did.
Yeah, Orson Welles didn't sleep. Canon.
Yeah,
So,
true.
Is there any big name or an up and coming artist that you would love to work with?
Yeah, I mean, I have had the honor and the pleasure of working with a lot of really talented people, whether they're, you know, just kind of starting to make their way up like I am, or whether they're, you know, slightly more established people. And then there's obviously I have a bucket list of people that I would love to get a chance to work with. So I mean, I have friends that I've had the chance to work with and love to work with in the future, like my friend Michael Lee Harris and my friend Fitz Underwood, who I did Elk Mountain with, my friend Naomi Franquise, who I did the Bitch Planet triple feature story with, and then she's gone on to do some Squirrel Girl stuff, and she's doing the new Harrow County series, which is amazing, and she's amazing. And there's just a whole bunch of people that I respect and look up to, like Richie Pope and Ronald Wimberly and Ben Passmore. And then people like I would love to do something with Annie Wu. Like her whole run on Hawkeye was incredible. All that Kate Bishop stuff. And I'd like to just see her do more comics in general. Like she's amazing.
Yeah.
John Paul Leon, who is also in this Crimes of Passion book, is one of my all-time favorite artists ever. Like I love everything he does. I love that noir style that he has. He did the latest in the Kurt Busiek like Elseworlds stories. So it was the Batman. I forget what it was called, but it was kind of like the Superman story that he did where the kid was named Clark Kent and he was in the real world and he kind of like started to develop these powers, secret identity.
Yeah.
Right?
Secret identity.
Yeah. So
that
John
art
Paul
is so good.
Yeah. John Paul Leon did the Batman version of that, which just wrapped up with Busiek.
What is that called? It's it took so long to finish because I think someone got
I want to
sick.
call it Curse of the Night or something. Yeah, John Paul Leon unfortunately got sick, but he's better now, which is
good.
But you know, other people like Javier Peludo, who did a bunch of Spider-Man stuff, and he did the Robin Year One, and the Batgirl Year One book. His stuff was great.
Batgirl, I love Batgirl Year One because I love Killer Moth.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a one-man fan club.
Yep. I mean,
also is Booster Gold.
Yeah. Marcos Martin, I love. He's incredible. And then number one on my list is Mike Allred. Like Mike Allred, Laura Allred. Look, if I got a chance to do something with them, his run on X-Force Ecstatics.
Ecstatics is my favorite X book too.
Yeah, I'm in love and everything that, I mean, Mad Men, and you know, his FF run with Matt Fraction, and basically everything that he's done, I am in love with his art style and Laura's colors and just kind of how he puts everything together and how he thinks. So one day, you know, top of my list to do work with Mike Allred on just anything.
Yeah, literally just draw whatever.
I'm excited to see the documentary his son is making about him.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that.
My store sold out of the Bowie book before I could pick it up.
That's gotta be hard for you.
Yeah, that's like the one artist I would could see being the perfect person for David Bowie.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll have to find it somewhere to actually read it.
Yeah.
And this final question is a new one.
Okay.
We always start off with the sandwich one, and this one Jake added, and I hope it goes well because it's kind of like us, just out there.
Okay.
All right. If you set up a Rube Goldberg machine, what would be your first and last things, and what would its purpose be?
Oh man. Like every time I think of a Rube Goldberg machine, there's like a boot involved in some way, shape, or form.
That's fair.
I don't know why. Yeah, there's usually a boot that's like kicking something or stomping something or some variation of boot. So I think a boot would be the first thing. And the last thing, well, I think the last thing in its purpose would be the same thing, and it would be a Reese's cup, and putting it into my mouth. So I don't know whether that's just like a robot arm or like a pendulum swinging or like something that just gets knocked off the shelf. Yeah, just get me a Reese's cup. That's what I want.
Well, you know what, Jake, you did good. That is a good question.
Yeah, I was just scrolling through Facebook and I came up with it.
You know what? You don't have to sleep in the cage tonight.
Oh,
yay! So, Jordan, thank you for coming on. Like that was wow.
Thank you guys.
I think I needed that one story.
Yeah.
Now, where can people find you? And is there anything you have coming up that you want to plug? Any stories you're writing or things like that?
Yeah, you can find me on all social media at JRSosa18, JRSOSA18. The big thing coming up is my first ever DC story, which is going to be in the Crimes of Passion anthology that comes out on February 5th, which is 2 weeks from now, which is freaking me out. So I'm ready for that. And I've got some other stuff that I'm working on, but I'm slowly kind of getting that together and getting ready to pitch stuff to some different places and crossing fingers that stuff gets picked up and put out. So look out for me, the rest of the year. I'll try to get out to some conventions. I think I'm going to try to get to WonderCon, obviously Baltimore Comic-Con. Try to be at some other places, probably like SPX and New York Comic-Con. So if you're at any of those shows, you might see me walking around. Feel free to say hi. But yeah, that's basically what this year is looking like for me.
Thank you for coming on. And you can find us at Super Sons, DC Super Sons on Twitter and patreon.com/Super Sons. Thanks for listening.